This is a lecture from Open Tuition. To benefit from the lecture, you should download the free lecture notes from opentuition.com.
Behavioural aspects of management control. And we start with quite a famous theory, McGregor's Theory X and Theory Y. And he had this theory really about the assumptions managers make about the attitude of their staff. And it's kind of reciprocal. If you make certain assumptions about your staff, they might make certain assumptions about you, but you will manage them in a particular way. So the Theory X manager really believes deep down that staff do not like work. Okay, so work is hated in a way. That's maybe overstating it slightly, but essentially people are coming to work because they have to earn money to eat and to live somewhere and so on, but they get no other joy from it. And if you believe that is the kind of attitude of your resentful, reluctant staff, then as a manager you're going to take a very kind of harsh line about discipline. You'll be watching them very carefully because you'll be assuming they'll try to miss out work and cut corners. You might even suspect they're going to be stealing from you and so on. So you're going to be really very autocratic, very dictatorial. The Theory Y manager takes the view, and the great phrase that was used really by McGregor is that work is as natural as play. And we have the view here that people want to come to work. They get obviously social interaction from it. They meet people, kind of gets them out of the house. But also they get an enormous reward from work, and not just monetary reward, but they get satisfaction at jobs well done and being given challenge and recognition and so on. And there you are likely to be a much more participative manager. Really get on to kind of contingency theory, I suppose. You will want to interact with your employees. You will not feel you have to watch them like a hawk in case they try to miss out work or steal from you and so on. Now McGregor called these Theory X and Theory Y. He didn't call them Theory Nasty and Theory Nice, or Theory Wrong and Theory Right. We would probably all prefer to be managed within the Theory Y type of assumptions and environment. But he called X and Y to be neutral because he did recognize that there may be some people and some jobs and indeed some managers where the Theory X works best, that these people do hate their work, that it's a very mundane, maybe quite a tough job, and they are only doing it because it's the only job they can get and they need to work and so on. And there you probably do have to be a very strict manager. Whereas other people, of course, would not react well to that at all. They would expect a more participative approach. So very much like Handy and his kind of best fit theory, really. It's kind of horses for courses. And then so far as a manager can, you want to change maybe your attitude. Now, this is rather, asking you to change your spots. You mean if you are inherently a kind of Theory X manager, prefer to take the kind of giving orders dictatorial view, it's quite hard for you to become more inclusive and participative. Similarly, if you're someone who likes discussing and kind of problem solving, it doesn't come naturally to you then just to give orders, but you can maybe try to adjust just a little bit the way in which you manage people to suit them and to get the best from them. The sorts of reward that you can give people to try and encourage them to do good work. There are intrinsic rewards. This is the name given to rewards which come from within, like a sense of satisfaction, achievement, a feeling that you're learning and growing and gaining skills and so on. And then there are extrinsic rewards, like a pay rise, like a bonus, like a promotion, like a manager telling you well done, praise, and so on. Both are very important. Many people would say that for many employees, maybe those of higher skill levels and so on, the intrinsic rewards are, at least for part of their career, maybe more important than the extrinsic rewards. I mean, you can see it because some people have a little bit of a choice what sort of job you could go into. You go into a job which pays quite well now, but which is, you're giving you high extrinsic rewards now, but it's maybe not going to lead very far. You're going to be maybe a little stuck there. Or you could go into a job which has got low pay now, but where you get lots of experience and training. And you can see maybe in 5 or 10 years' time that then your one is going to overtake the other, and that the intrinsic rewards really begin paying off. People try to design jobs which are better for people. So you think what is going to turn people on? And if you're thinking of, let's assume that most people want some of these intrinsic rewards here. You want achievement, personal advancement, you want to feel that the job is interesting, that maybe there's a bit of problem solving in it, and so on. And maybe the more you can introduce into a job which appeals to these intrinsic rewards and makes use of them, maybe the better the job is. And people try to do this deliberately through job design. You design aspects of the job to try to make it better. Now, there are 3 parts or types of job design. There is job enlargement, which is really called, these are both in fact called horizontal changes. And these are mean that there's no real increase in responsibility or difficulty or judgment, really. So in terms of an accounting environment, it might be saying, to somebody on the kind of receivables ledger, at the minute you're just doing the debits, we'll also let you do the credits. But nevertheless, it's very kind of routine work. It's almost exactly the same. Job rotation is probably just putting a bit of interest into it. You could say to someone, right, this week you're going to be working on the receivables ledger, next week we'll have you working on the payables ledger, maybe the week after that we'll move you around again, and you'll be working on wages and salaries and so on, then you come back to the receivables ledger and so on. But in each of these situations, the person is just basically recording the debits and the credits, a little bit more interest in it, but it's at the same fairly basic level. Those are thought to be unlikely to provide very much by way of permanent intrinsic rewards. The first one, or the only one that really is thought to pay off in the long term, is job enrichment, which is a vertical change. So in other words, you introduce more responsibility, more learning, more judgment, more challenge perhaps to the job. So now, instead of somebody just doing the debits and credits on the sales ledger, maybe you give them some responsibility for following up slow payers. Or maybe you allow them to ring up a customer who's paid the wrong amount, or they've overpaid, you can kind of talk to them about that. Or maybe they're just able to answer the telephone and speak to customers about queries on their accounts. And this is introducing, really quite a different kind of level and realm of responsibility, and really making it a better, less humdrum job, and people should enjoy it better. What is pay? How is it really acting as a motivator? How is it going to turn people on? This is obviously an extrinsic reward. And we have to think, first of all, how is pay determined? Do we have grades and so on you can find within a particular pay? You have to obviously pay enough to recruit people of the right caliber and so on, yet you don't want to pay too much that you're going to be non-competitive and so on. What do people want from pay? Do they just want a constant weekly or monthly amount? Or do they want pay which in some ways recognizes performance and maybe builds in some bonuses? It's all very well building in a bonus for good performance, but should you build in some sort of penalty for bad performance. Exactly how is this relationship of performance and pay to be engineered? And then there are things like group rewards and so on. Well, what you do is not just reward an individual. You say this whole department will get a bonus of some sort, provided the whole department does well. And this should encourage much better group working and cooperation and communication within the group. If you offer rewards just to people, then it can lead to what's called gaming, where a customer rings up and says, "Could I speak to so and so?" And you tell lies. You say, "No, this person's not available. Can I talk to you?" And then you get the credit for an order. And really, what you've done is, you haven't really helped the company. It's just you have kind of stolen the glory for yourself, so to speak. Now that at least gets an order for you, but if for the company. But think about, there's some reward for your salesperson of the month. And what you do is, again, you receive a telephone call that's important, but you don't pass it on to the other salesperson that this customer wanted to speak to. So the salesperson, if you like, begins making errors caused by you deliberately not passing on information, and it brings down their performance. Your performance doesn't go up, but of course, relatively, you are now the salesperson of the month. So that's that sort of gamesmanship or non-congruent type of dysfunctional decision making, which group rewards are thought to reduce. Another thing that's important with behavioural aspects of performance is how you set objectives for people. And most people talk about SMART objectives. First of all, it's normally regarded as worth setting objectives, because if you don't set somebody an objective, they have got no clue about whether they're doing okay, whether they should try harder, and so on. And you don't want them waiting to the end of the year when they get their staff appraisal, where they're told they haven't been doing so well. So setting objectives is kind of normal. And these are the 5 elements which are thought to be required on objectives. First of all, stated, or maybe specific is the better word. You must know what the objective is. It must be very precise. You can't just say to somebody, "I want improved performance," or "I want this department to be better." I mean, what is improved performance? What is a better department? You would have to say more like, "I want the profits to increase by a certain amount," or "I want the time between getting an order and dispatching the goods to be reduced," and so on. Absolutely specific. If it's not, people don't know what you're talking about, and then at the end of the period, when you criticise them, or if you criticise them, they can argue and say, "Oh, I didn't know that's what you meant when you said improved performance." Usually this means it has to be measurable. You have to be able to get numbers of some sort, because numbers are more precise for communication, and you should try to get numbers. You should try to measure it, even when it's not maybe that easy to measure. Certainly financial stuff is already measured in terms of money. You can then measure non-financial stuff like the percentage of maybe errors in dispatches, or the percentage of rejected goods and so on there. So they are non-financial but quantified measures. But then in some businesses, things like morale is important. If you're in a service industry, let's say an airline, and you're welcoming passengers on board, or the cabin staff are welcoming passengers on board, and the morale of the cabin staff is low, and they're all grumpy and bad-tempered, then this is going to hurt the business. Or similarly in receptions of restaurants, hotels and so on. You don't want bad-tempered, unhappy people to be there. You want them to be having high morale. So if it's important for your business, you should set an objective for it. And even if it's hard to measure something like morale, you need to make an effort, because it's not consistent to say high morale is important because it gives a good impression to customers, and then not try to assess or measure it. So you might have to get quite creative in morale. You could obviously give people questionnaires. You could ask customers for feedback, what they thought of the staff and so on there. You can look at staff turnover, because high staff turnover usually is taken as a marker of poor morale. Lateness, sickness days and so on can all be used as a way of perhaps measuring morale. It has to be agreed, achievable, accepted here. And the thought is here that if we have the difficulty out here, so as we make a budget more and more difficult, the objectives more and more difficult, this is your performance up here. So here's the difficulty of the budget, how hard it is to get. Here's the actual performance which is achieved. The normal kind of diagram goes like that. So if you set a very easy budget to achieve, people will get to that and kind of stop. Why would they try harder? Set it a bit more difficult, they will still see it's quite possible to do this. But if you set a kind of a budget or a target way out there, which is obviously beyond the realms of possibility, no matter how hard you try, and this is done habitually all of the time, then many people will just get fed up with it, just give up in many ways. They kind of say, no matter how hard I try, I will not hit this budget, and if I don't hit the budget, my manager is going to shout at me. So if he's going to shout at me when I try hard, I may as well not try hard, and I'll still be shouted at. And I'll actually pull down the performance again. So we have to try and judge a kind of difficulty which is going to inspire people. It's making them stretch just that little bit further. And because they've stretched towards something which is quite difficult, you can then praise them when they get it, and they feel great satisfaction getting this great budget, this difficult budget. So we have to agree with people, try to agree that something is acceptable, it's achievable, because if they think it's not achievable, it's not going to work very well. And we'll see that again when we come down to top down, bottom up at the bottom. It has to be relevant. It has to be relevant to the organisation, and indeed relevant to the person. So don't set somebody an objective which you've got no influence on. That's not fair. But also, people like to see why, if I get this objective, it's going to help the organisation. So if you were in a hospital and you were asked to I don't know, perhaps you were in the X-ray department, and you were given a kind of objective, maybe to cut down the time it took for a particular sort of X-ray from 15 minutes to 10 minutes. At least then it can be kind of explained to you, if you reduce the time taken for X-rays by a third, then you'll be able to see far more patients, and this will help the success of the hospital and so on. Now, if you can see that kind of pattern going through, if I do this, this will happen, and this will improve the organisation. This gives the objective a lot of strength. But if it just appears to be your manager making you jump through hoops, do this because I tell you, and the manager can't explain why doing this will actually help the organisation, then you begin to think the manager's playing games with you, is exercising power just for the sake of it. Finally, time limited. Normally objectives are given for a year. Do this within a year or maybe within 6 months. You have to be given a deadline to aim at. Top down and bottom up objectives. Top down come from the managers down. They are kind of largely imposed on people. And of course there are big dangers on this here. That the objectives are too difficult, or they're not accepted by the subordinate. There can also be difficulties here about the relevant, because these set of objectives just kind of come floating down, maybe without very much explanation about why hitting these objectives is important. This would be the kind of theory X way of doing it. We've got to get back to McGregor, the dictatorial way. Bottom up is where your employees, your subordinates, suggest objectives for themselves. Now, generally speaking, they would suggest these targets, budgets, objectives, and so on, and then as a process of negotiation, the manager, people will look after themselves, build in a bit of slack. So the risk here is that these bottom-up objectives are a bit non-challenging really. And it's up to the manager to kind of question them and so on. But the great thing is if you have suggested an objective, if you've set an objective, it's very hard for you later to adopt the attitude that this objective is not relevant, and if you participated in setting the level of the objective, it becomes very difficult for you later on to say, well, this was far too hard, I couldn't get that, I'll just kind of give up. It's your objective in many ways. I suppose this bottom-up approach is much more likely to occur with your theory Y participative type of manager, who would be after really hearing the views of the workforce about what might be reasonable and feasible, even with a little bit of extra effort. Management by objectives then arose from this idea of objectives. Basically what happens is employees are given objectives. Now those could be top down or bottom up, but objectives are agreed. Let's say it's the profits for a shop. You're given profits for a shop. And then essentially it is up to the manager of the shop to hit those profits. And head office will not kind of come back and interfere and say, well, you shouldn't employ an extra staff member, or you shouldn't order those goods and so on. It's kind of left up to the employee in how to achieve these objectives. So give them the objective, then be hands off. Now, if that works and the employees' subordinates get the objectives, then it's fantastically rewarding. I've been given the objectives, they've left me alone, I've made a series of correct decisions, I've tried quite hard, and my goodness, I got it. And you feel great satisfaction in that. Terribly motivating to be put in that sort of position of having responsibility. And the idea is you give these people objectives, it motivates them, and of course if all the departments hit their objectives, it's like putting a jigsaw together. This department hits a production objective, this department hits a sales objective, this department hits the distribution objective and so on. They all hit their objectives, assuming they've been coherently decided together, arranged, then the company should do better as well. So it's got this twin idea, it's better for the individuals and it's better for the company,